One of the first things you need to learn about JavaScript is how to print to the console. You may have written a program with 100 lines of code and you run it and nothing happens. That's possibly because you needed to actually send some output to the console that is a result of your code. It's also really important to know how to do this because sometimes you need to see what's going on behind the scenes when you have an error and you're trying to debug it. So this is an absolutely essential thing that you're going to use from now on. Console.log is a function. Specifically, log is a function that's attached to the console API. You don't really need to know too much about how functions are written yet, what's going on behind the scenes there. This is built into JavaScript. You can just use it the way you're supposed to, and it will work. In this case, all we have to do is call it. And when you call a function, you give it the name, and then you use parentheses like this and pass something in. That's a term that developers use that basically says, we need to give this function something to work with. So we put that between the parentheses. And notice that this is a string of characters and it's in quotes. That's important in JavaScript. Strings have to be in quotes. We're going to talk more about data types later, so don't worry too much more about that now. But this line of code will execute and we should see it come out in the console. Now, in order to do that, I need to use the node command and I need to do it in a terminal. I'm going to use the integrated terminal here in VS Code. I'm going to go up to the menu and say New Terminal. You also, instead of doing that, could use the keyboard shortcut Control backtick. You also can use Command J to open and close this panel, even if it's not on the terminal section. It might be on one of these other ones. But once we have this, you can see we've got a prompt, and I realize my prompt looks kind of fancy. Yours may not look like this. I customized it a long time ago. And also, because of the way I customized it, I can see where I am, but you probably can't necessarily tell what folder you're in. So this is where some of the very basic terminal commands come in. I'm going to use pwd to get the working directory of where I exist right now. And you can see that I'm in the exercises folder, which is inside the printing to the console folder, which is inside 01-basic-syntax, and so on and so forth, all the way back to the home folder on my computer. So that's important because when you go to run your file, you have to be able to tell the computer where to find it. And if you're not in this directory, you may have to give it part of the path depending on where you actually are. So I went ahead and moved to this directory so that I can run it directly. You also need to make sure that you have installed npm and node in order to do this. Once you've installed those, you can use the node command. And because I'm right here in this folder, I can say demo.js, and we see the output in the console, JavaScript. And then it brings me back to the terminal prompt. So this is how we're going to work on these JavaScript files while we're working simply in a console long before we get to the point where we're ready to use it in combination with things like HTML and CSS for websites. Right now, we're just going to learn about logic and programming, and we're going to do everything right here in the console. So printing is essential. Let's practice it one more time. I'm going to say console.log, open parentheses, and I'm going to put my name, Carrie. And I'm going to end with a semicolon. You may have discovered, if you've been working on this already, that JavaScript will still compile and run if you don't put the semicolon in. But it's actually considered best practice to do so. You want to be consistent, you want to have clean code, format things well. So get in the habit of doing it, because when you switch over and learn a language like Java that does require it, it will constantly cause you problems if you try to run it without them. So get in the habit now of adding those semicolons. Okay, so let's run it again. In the terminal, I'm going to hit the up arrow on my keyboard to bring up the last command that I put in and just hit enter. And I see now that I have two lines in the output, JavaScript and Carrie. So each of these lines of code, line 5 and line 8, both executed in the order I wrote them, and we see the result there. So that's really all there is to it. You're going to learn in the future how to send all sorts of things to the console, not just simple strings. You'll have numbers and booleans and entire expressions that can be evaluated. But we will get there when we get there. For now, the only last thing that I need to do is to make a git commit here. So I'm going to say git status and see that demo.js has changes but has not been staged. I will add it. And then I'm going to check that status again, and you can see now it has been staged. It's in green, and it's ready to be committed. I'm going to add a message. This is important. You always want to add a message to be specific about what this commit was for. And so let's see, I'll just say completed the printing to the console demo. And there we have it. The last thing you need to do is to go over to the practice file in the same folder and put in a little bit of time so that you get some hands-on practice. This is very important, especially when you're new at this. There's something about practicing coding, getting your hands in the keyboard, typing things over and over again. It helps build that muscle memory and makes it feel like second nature. And it's not going to feel that way right away. So you really do have to practice, and you will get to the point where you're not really thinking about it anymore, but only if you practice. So here are several ways that you can come in and practice this console.log and get used to the rhythm of running it in the terminal and seeing your output. And that will help you prepare for the next things that you're about to learn. That's it. I will see you next time.